I have been working my way through the book of Job, looking at each verse, doing an inductive grammatical analysis of key points, the verbs, participles, etc., nouns. What I'm trying to do then is to complete the book as I have the time. But we are at chapter 25. We have done the previous chapters in the book of Job, as well as 28 and 38 to 42 in that manner. If anyone is interested in following along with the Hebrew text, I'm now at chapter 25, which is going to be dealing with Bildad's third speech. And in a very brief speech, Bildad concludes the debate between Job and his three friends with a statement of God's transcendent greatness over against man's utter frailty and abasement. And so we pick it up, the Hebrew, then looking at his third and final speech in the debate, that is Bildad's. It reads, Vaya'an Bildad Hashuhi Vayomer. And Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, Vaya'an is from Anah, to answer. It is the cow imperfect third masculine singular from Anah with the vav consecutive. So Bildad answered the Shuhite, Vayomer, and said. Vayomer again is the cow imperfect third masculine singular from Amar, and said with the vav hafek or vav consecutive. Hamshel v'fachat imo oses shalom bimromav. Here we have dominion and fear are with him. Hamshel is from mashal, to rule, and here we have an infinitive absolute, to have or to cause to rule. And I believe we can render this infinitive absolute from mashal as something like the ruling and or dominion and fear or dread. Ufachat means dread, are with him. Oses shalom bimromav. He makes peace in his high places. Oseh is your cow participle masculine singular from asa, who makes shalom bimromav, in his high places. Marom meaning high, and here we have the of, your pronominal suffix third masculine singular. So what is he saying here? First of all, God's nature is powerful and dreadful. It is such, Bildad says, that everyone must have a reverential fear. And he brings peace in heaven. He enforces peace. God is so powerful that he can stop all opposition in heaven and upon earth. And so he makes peace in his high places where he dwells. I'm reminded of the New Testament of Colossians 1:20 and also Ephesians 1:10. Colossians 1:20, just to read that in the Greek and look at it for just a moment here. Colossians 1:20, bear with me here, I'm looking it up. Colossians 1:20 reads, and through him, kaidiel tu, apakatalak saitapanta esautan, ere na poiesas dia tu haimatas tu staruau tu, diau tu etita epites geis, etita in tois uranois. Speaking of Christ, and through him to reconcile all things unto himself by making peace through the blood of his cross. Jesus, having come from heaven in the incarnation, Colossians says he makes peace through the blood of his cross, um, through him, whether things in heaven or things upon the earth. Another text, of course, is Ephesians chapter 1, verse 10. And Ephesians 1, verse 10 makes a very similar statement that Paul says that we have the understanding that someday God is going to wrap up everything in Christ. Esoi kanamia tu pleromatas ton kairon anakephalai kephalaiosas de tapanta ento Christo. Ta epitois uranois kai ta epites geis in auto. That is, that there's a dispensation coming, or rule of God, when in the fullness of time, to wrap up or to sum up all things in Christ, whether things in heaven or things upon the earth. So we have a similar New Testament application of the concept of making peace in his high places. And the New Testament applies that to Christ in his atoning cross work. Then we go on to verse 3. Hayesh mispar ligdudav va'almi lo yakum orehu. That is there any number of his troops, speaking of God, Bildad is saying, and upon whom upon whom does not his light arise? Lo yakum orehu. In other words, his light arises everywhere, God's light. Hayesh mispar, there is a number of his, is there any number? This is a question, interrogative, hey, is there any number to his troops? In other words, looking at God's angelic host are innumerable, and upon whom does not his light arise? Lo yakum is from kum, cow imperfect, third masculine singular from kum. Does not orehu, or is light, and who is your pronominal suffix, third masculine singular. So upon whom does not his light arise? The thought here is God's heavenly armies, including the angels and the stars, are numerous. Isaiah 40:26 and Jeremiah 33:22, Genesis 15:5 and Daniel 7:9 have similar statement about the innumerable hosts of God and his light. God illuminates everything, and nothing escapes his eye. I think that's the thought here in that last phrase. His eye is everywhere, and he illuminates everything. And we have a parallel, similar idea in the New Testament in the book of James, where in James chapter 1, verse 17, it speaks of God in a very similar way as what we have here in the book of Job. So we move on into the next phrase, and that is, or the next verse, that is verse 4. Uma yitzdak anosh im el. Uma yizkeh yelud isha. These are questions actually. Uma yitzdak anosh im el. That is, who can be just with God? Uma yizkeh yelud isha. Or who can be clean that is born of a woman? Yitzdak is the cow imperfect third masculine singular from sadak, to be just, or to be justified. So how, I guess we could render, instead of who, how can man be just with God? Or how can one born of a woman be pure? Yizkeh is from zakah, the cow imperfect third masculine singular, to be pure. So how that is one yelud isha, two nouns in construct, one that has been born of a woman, be pure. And what the text is asking here, how can man who is born of a sinful woman be just before a holy God? This is an attack against Job's plea that he is just. Going back to chapter 4, verses 17 to 18, 14:4, and 15:14. Job had made these claims that he was just. And so what Bildad is critiquing what Job has claimed again. It's interesting. It's how can a man be just? My mind goes to the New Testament, dikaiao, to be just. And it is interesting that in the New Testament, the book of Romans, the whole idea of justification by faith coming through Jesus Christ is a major theme of the book of Romans, defining how sinful man is made right with a holy God, being justified, dikaiumenoi, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption which is in Christ Jesus, whom God has set forth as a hilasterion, as a place of atonement through faith in his blood. So I was thinking as I read this of the New Testament teaching of justification, especially in the book of Romans. So then we come to verse 5, as Bildad is going to conclude here, 5 and 6, his final speech. Hein ad yareach lo ya'ahil. That is, behold, even the moon does not have brightness, or is not caused to be bright before God. V'chochavim lo zaku be'enav, and the stars are not pure in his sight. Here again, even the moon has no brightness before him, and the stars are not pure in his sight. Ya'ahel is from ahal, to be bright. It's a hifil imperfect third masculine singular from ahal. Notice the AI vowel pattern here, pathak hirik yod. So the moon has not, it cannot be caused to be bright before him. And the stars are not pure in his sight. Zaku is the cow perfect third common plural from zakak, to be pure. And what Job, or what Bildad is saying here, even the moon and the stars are imperfect in God's sight and have no brightness before him. how much more imperfect man then? And how much more is man imperfect before God? Seems to be the thought of Bildad. And then in verse 6, we come to the end of Bildad's final speech. Af ki anosh rima uven adam tole'a. How much less man, anosh, mere mankind, in that he is a worm. Uven adam tole'a, or the son of man, that is like a maggot. So the thought as he concludes is, off key would be how much, I guess we could say less understood, is mere anosh, mere man, that he is who is simply a rima, a worm, or the son of man who is tole'a, who is like a grub worm or a maggot. And so Bildad is finishing his speech, and one might compare chapter 4, 19 to 21, and chapter 15, verse 16, with this verse. When it speaks of man as a worm, it alludes to man's corruption and weakness. The thought is, if the stars are imperfect before God, then man is as base as a worm or a maggot in his presence. So Bildad concludes his speech by critiquing Job, that Job is okay. What he's really saying is no one is Job. But I think, again, the friends have missed the point. They're still accusing Job in this last speech of Bildad of suffering because he has been a sinner or bad. And that's not the theme, or I should say, that's not correct theology, that the writer of Job is trying to show that we can't understand why at times bad things happen to good people. So at any rate, as I read this text, a couple thoughts come to mind, and that is the whole idea of being just before God. I love the New Testament book of Romans, which defines how man can become just before God through Jesus Christ and what he has accomplished, and one can then be acquitted through faith in him. Well, let me stop there. We're going to now move on to 26 to 31. I've done 28, and we'll continue to work on the Hebrew words, vocabulary, grammar, inductively, and a running commentary.